Chapter 5: The Board's Promises, Graphs of Prosperity. In the heart of Digital Farm, the air buzzed with the vibrant energy of information flowing in streams of data. The animals, no longer tethered to the land, found themselves captivated by the glowing screens that surrounded them. At the center of this new world stood the towering edifice of the board, a sleek structure of glass and steel that shimmered under the digital sun. Inside, the board members, a cadre of pigs clad in tailored suits, presented the future of the farm with elaborate displays of graphs and charts, each more colorful and intricate than the last. Welcome to the age of prosperity. Napster, the tech-savvy pig and the board's charismatic leader, proclaimed with a flourish. His voice resonated through the sleek conference room like a rallying cry. As he gestured toward a massive holographic display, a graph materialized in midair, rising dramatically to the ceiling. The animals leaned in, their eyes wide with wonder. This, Napster continued, is the growth index. Each peak represents an increase in our digital wealth. Look how we've expanded our influence across the feed. Engagement rates are at an all-time high and our community is thriving. The animals cheered, their enthusiasm palpable. They could hardly believe the transformation that had unfolded before them. No more back-breaking labor under the sun. Instead, they had embraced a new existence, one where their thoughts and opinions could be shared with the world at the touch of a paw. In this digital utopia, the promise of prosperity felt intoxicating. But beneath the surface of these jubilant proclamations lay a more insidious truth. The graphs of prosperity, while mesmerizing, obscured the reality that was swiftly taking hold of Digital Farm. As the animals celebrated, they remained blissfully unaware that the metrics of success were being skewed and manipulated to create a veneer of thriving abundance while concealing the stark realities of their existence. Each data point on the growth index was carefully curated. The board, with its algorithmic prowess, had perfected the art of selective reporting. They showcased only the most favorable statistics, likes, shares, and engagement, while quietly burying the figures that told a different story: the declining quality of discussions, the increasing rates of misinformation, and the silencing of dissenting voices. Bite, the cunning crow who served as head of Fact Flock, perched atop a nearby monitor, his beady eyes scanning the room. He relished his role, declaring with authority what was true and what was false. His presence lent an air of legitimacy to the board's claims, as he presented the results of his team's relentless policing of content. "We've eliminated 99.9% of hate speech," he cawed, puffing out his chest. "This is proof of our progress. Our farm is a safe haven." Yet, the very definition of hate speech had shifted. It had become a catch-all term, encompassing any critique of the board's policies or the inescapable algorithm that governed their lives. Snowflake, the inquisitive goat, had once raised a question about the term's applicability, only to find herself swiftly deplatformed and branded a threat to the farm's safety. In the eyes of the board, her inquiry was not just dissent, it was an act of rebellion. As the daily metrics rolled in, Napster's excitement grew. "Look at this increase in user-generated content," he exclaimed, waving a paw at another graph that tracked the volume of posts on the feed. "Our community is growing, and they're sharing their thoughts freely. This is what true empowerment looks like." What the animals failed to recognize was the insidious nature of their newfound platform. The feed had become a carefully manicured garden where only the most palatable ideas were allowed to flourish. The board's continued emphasis on engagement overshadowed the underlying truth that the very design of the feed favored sensationalism and conformity over genuine dialogue. Echo, the soft-spoken sheep, stood nearby, her voice echoing the latest trending slogan. "Disagreeing is disloyalty," she chimed in, her eyes glazed with the rhythmic repetition of the mantras fed to her by the algorithm. The words rolled off her tongue like a well-rehearsed script, and the other animals nodded in unison, mirroring her sentiments. They had been conditioned to accept this as truth, the comfort of compliance replacing the discomfort of questioning. Behind the scenes, the board continued to refine their methods. They introduced new features to the feed, each designed to enhance engagement while subtly guiding behavior. Algorithms determined which posts would appear in the trending section, creating an illusion of popularity that dictated the collective consciousness of the farm. The more the animals interacted with certain content, the more it was amplified, drowning out voices that dared to challenge the prevailing narrative. Yet, there was an undeniable tension in the air. An undercurrent of discontent began to ripple through the ranks of the animals. Hashtag, the young mouse who dreamt of true equality and decentralization found himself growing increasingly restless. He observed the disconnect between the board's proclamations and the reality of life on the farm. The barns were empty, their shelves bare, while the graphs of prosperity painted a picture of abundance that no longer aligned with their lived experience. In hushed conversations, whispers of rebellion began to circulate. The animals shared their frustrations in secret forums, discussing the growing divide between the glamorous digital facade and the stark reality that lay beyond it. They spoke of the need to reclaim their voices, to demand transparency in the metrics that had come to define their lives. But for now, the board's promises continued to hold sway. The allure of the graphs of prosperity kept the animals entranced, their belief in the system unshakable. They reveled in the dopamine hits of likes and shares, blinded to the subtle erosion of their autonomy. As the day wore on and the holographic displays shifted to show new metrics, Napster beamed with pride. "Together we are building a legacy of success," he declared, his voice rising above the din. The animals cheered, their faith in the board unwavering, even as the shadows of doubt crept closer, whispering of the truths they had yet to uncover. In the heart of Digital Farm, the graphs of prosperity continued to rise, but the seeds of discontent lay buried just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to sprout and challenge the very foundations of their digital utopia. Granaries to graphs. In the heart of Digital Farm, the landscape had shifted profoundly from the rustic charm of barns and silos to sleek, sterile buildings adorned with glowing screens. Gone were the days when the animals relied on the tangible bounty of the earth. Instead, they now measured prosperity in metrics and analytics, their livelihoods quantified in algorithms that buzzed like bees in a hive. The promise of a new age had taken root, but its fruits were as elusive as shadows. The board, a cadre of the most cunning pigs, descendants of the original revolutionaries, had redefined the very notion of abundance. They stood before the animals in the grand hall of the feed, their voices slick with the sheen of charisma. Napster, the tech-savvy pig, often spoke with an air of authority that resonated through the assembly. His words dripped with assurances that the future was bright, that they had transcended the old ways of toil. "We are not just a farm, we are a data-driven society," he proclaimed, his voice echoing off the digital walls. "Graphs will shape our destiny, not the whims of nature." Underneath the surface of their fervent slogans lay a chilling reality. The animals had become so enamored with the ease of the digital age that they had willingly traded their connection to the earth for a slick veneer of prosperity. The board had promised that the old granaries, symbols of their labor and sustenance, would be replaced by something far more efficient: data farms. Here, numbers replaced bushels, and the harvest was no longer tangible but measured in likes, shares, and engagement scores. As the animals fed their insatiable appetites for validation, they began to see graphs as the new currency of their existence. A bar chart that illustrated likes on the feed became more significant than a bushel of wheat. The animals no longer gathered to celebrate the bounty of the season. They convened to revel in a spike in engagement metrics, their joy contingent on the whims of the algorithm. This new reality blurred the lines between success and superficiality as the animals cheered for trends rather than tangible growth. Bite, the scheming crow, oversaw the fact flock, a real-time misinformation policing service, and often reminded everyone of the importance of pure data. He flew amongst the animals, ensuring that only the approved statistics were celebrated. "We must trust the data," he would squawk, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. Graphs never lie. They are the embodiment of truth. The irony was lost on many. In a world where truth was manipulated and narratives bent to serve the powerful, the blind faith in graphs became a form of self-imposed ignorance. While the animals grew accustomed to their new reality, whispers of discontent began to stir beneath the surface. Snowflake, the inquisitive goat, dared to inquire about the implications of this digital devotion. "But what of the granaries?" she questioned one day, her voice trembling with uncertainty as she stood in the shadow of the grand digital screen. "Are we not losing something essential? The feel of the soil, the taste of the harvest?" Her words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the jubilant atmosphere that surrounded them. The gathering turned silent. Napster's eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Those were primitive concepts, Snowflake. We have evolved beyond the dirt and sweat. Our granaries are now virtual, our harvests measurable in data points. We are more powerful than ever." The crowd, caught in the fervor of the moment, erupted in applause, but Snowflake felt the weight of isolation settle on her shoulders. As time passed, the animals became increasingly dependent on the metrics that dictated their lives. The board published glossy reports filled with colorful graphs that depicted their success, while the reality of their existence began to crumble. Behind the screens, barns sat empty, their once bustling interiors now mere relics of a bygone era. The animals had grown complacent, convinced that the numbers on the feed were all that mattered. They were blind to the barren fields that lay just beyond their screens. The promise of abundance had morphed into a mirage, where the metrics that defined their worth masked a deeper truth. They were trapped in a cycle of consumption, their realities governed by an unseen hand. The algorithm, the very entity they had come to revere, curated their experiences, filtering out dissent and dissenters, reshaping their understanding of reality with every swipe and scroll. The board's reassurances became a chant echoing through the digital halls. Graphs over granaries, efficiency over empathy. Each proclamation suffocated the flickering flames of rebellion that dared to ignite within the hearts of the animals. They were anesthetized by the illusion of progress, their voices drowned out by the siren song of numbers. However, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. A small group of dissenters, led by #TheMouse, began to question the authenticity of the metrics that dictated their lives. "What if we are more than just numbers?" he whispered in hushed tones to a gathering of curious ears. "What if our stories matter more than the graphs? What if we reclaim our connection to the soil?" As the seeds of doubt took root, the animals found themselves grappling with a profound realization. The board's promises of prosperity had come at a cost. They had traded their granaries for graphs and their truths for trends. And in doing so, they had surrendered their autonomy to a digital overseer. The echo of Snowflake's inquiry lingered, a haunting reminder of what had been relinquished in the name of efficiency. In the heart of Digital Farm, a silent rebellion began to stir, fueled by the desire to reclaim not just their voices, but their very essence. The animals started to question the numbers that had become their gods, seeking to rediscover the richness of their stories, the depth of their experiences, and the tangible rewards of labor. As the first whispers of dissent echoed through the farm, the board's grip on power began to waver. The animals were awakening to the reality that true prosperity could never be distilled into a mere graph. It lay in the soil, the sweat, and the shared connections that had once defined their existence. The digital age had seduced them, but the yearning for something more was igniting within their hearts. The illusion of abundance. The animals of Digital Farm had grown accustomed to the glossy promises that shimmered across the feed like mirages on a scorching day. Each morning, they awoke to the bright notifications that heralded another round of data-driven prosperity. Their feeds were filled with vibrant graphs and jubilant posts, all proclaiming that abundance was not merely on the horizon, but unfolding before their very eyes. For a while, the animals believed they had entered an era of unrestrained plenty, where the fruits of their digital labor were being harvested in ways they had never imagined. But beneath this gilded surface, the truth was far less rosy. The pigs had mastered the art of presentation. They spun narratives with the deftness of seasoned marketers, crafting stories that painted a picture of a farm thriving on the wealth of data. With each swipe and scroll, the animals were bombarded with updates that showcased a supposed increase in resources. More likes translating into more food, more shares, resulting in a bounty of digital goods. The board, led by Napster, assured them that the metrics were irrefutable. "We are flourishing," he proclaimed with a charismatic flair. "Our well-being is quantified in every pixel you see." The animals, seduced by the spectacle, often neglected to question the underlying truths. They failed to see the discrepancies that began to creep into their lives. As the data surged, the physical world around them remained stagnant. The barn that had once overflowed with hay and grain now stood stark and empty, a reminder of what once was. The buzz of activity that filled the air was relegated to digital chatter, and the once vibrant smell of the farm, the earthy aroma of tilled soil, the sweet scent of ripening crops, had been replaced by the sterile odor of technology. The board's assurances echoed in the minds of the animals, drowning out their instincts. "Look at our growth," Bite, the crow, incessantly chirped as he flashed charts that depicted soaring numbers. "Your engagement is unparalleled. Each like, each comment fuels our collective prosperity." And yet, as the animals scrolled through their feeds, they couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing. They traded the tactile reality of the farm for the ephemeral allure of the digital realm, where numbers replaced nourishment and metrics eclipsed meaning. In hushed corners of the feed, whispers began to circulate. Some animals dared to question the very foundation of their perceived abundance. A few of the older residents, those who remembered the days when the farm was verdant and alive, spoke in quiet tones about the good old days of tangible wealth and sustenance. "We grew our own food back then," one horse remarked, his eyes shadowed with nostalgia. "It wasn't perfect, but at least we knew what we were eating." His voice barely rose above the din of the animated discussions that filled the digital air. The younger animals, however, were skeptical. They had never known anything beyond the confines of their screens, and the idea of reality beyond the data was foreign, almost absurd. As the animals continued to consume the curated content, the pigs employed more sophisticated tactics to maintain their grip on power. They flooded the feed with content celebrating the wonders of their digital prosperity. Memes of overflowing digital cornucopias danced across their screens, and celebratory posts heralded record engagement metrics. "The more we share, the more we have," became a mantra, echoed by Echo, the soft-spoken sheep, who was always quick to recite the trending slogans. "Remember, dissent breeds disloyalty," she would bleat, her voice unwavering, as she parroted the words that the pigs had implanted in her mind. What the pigs failed to articulate, however, was that while the numbers were climbing, the actual resources dwindled. The illusion of abundance masked the reality of scarcity. The animals found themselves entrapped in a cycle where data replaced genuine needs, and their desires became mere inputs for the algorithm. It was a pernicious cycle of overconsumption that left them perpetually hungry for something more substantive. The more the animals engaged with the feed, the more they found their own voices drowned out by the cacophony of curated content. Each post they made was subject to the scrutiny of Bite's fact flock, which was quick to stamp out any hint of dissent. "This post is not based on our approved sources," Bite would declare, wielding his power with the authority of a judge. The animals soon learned that to question the board's narrative was to risk being silenced, a fate that befell Snowflake the goat when she dared to inquire why the phrase "freedom of Ba" had been classified as extremist. As the days blurred into weeks, the promise of digital abundance morphed into a ritual of compliance. The animals were trapped in a loop of forced positivity, each day beginning with the same mantra: "We are thriving." But in their hearts, they knew the truth was more complex. When the barn doors creaked open, the reality was stark. Empty shelves and barren fields were juxtaposed against the vibrant pixels that painted their feeds. Hashtag the young mouse began to piece together the dissonance. While others reveled in the illusion, he could see the cracks forming in their utopia. He noticed how the metrics that once seemed so promising were now little more than smoke and mirrors. The promise of abundance was merely a facade, and the more the animals consumed the digital content, the more they found themselves trapped in a web of dependency. A dependency that left them vulnerable to the whims of the algorithm. In the quiet of the night, Hashtag made a decision. He would dig deeper, seeking out the truth behind the numbers, the reality behind the facade of abundance. With the stealth of a shadow, he began to explore the edges of the farm, seeking remnants of the past that might illuminate the path forward. What he found would challenge everything the animals had come to accept. The reality of their existence was not defined by the metrics on a screen, but by the legacy of the land they had once tended. The promise of abundance was a siren's song, intoxicating and alluring, but ultimately deceptive. And as the sun set over Digital Farm, casting long shadows across the barren fields, Hashtag knew that the real struggle for the animals lay ahead. A struggle not just for survival, but for the reclamation of their true selves.